Hello everyone, welcome to our final Artist Talks of ArtPath season 2021. Can y'all hear me okay? Yes? Okay. I'm Michelle Carlson from the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center. I'm the Education Director. And I want to thank you all for coming and supporting ArtPath. It was a great success this year. This is our 4th year. So be on the lookout for next summer. We'll be celebrating our 5th anniversary. Yeah. And we want to give a special thanks to Katrina Daniels. I don't think she's here yet. For creating the ArtPath, and her co-creator Emily Stevens from the City of East Lansing Park and Rec. City of Lansing, sorry. I want to welcome any special guests. Barb Whitney, our executive director, is here. I see a couple of board members, our staff. Special thanks to Julia for kind of heading up all these events. Sarah, for your special help. Kyle, as always, technical support. Kaylee, our intern, is actually leaving us tonight. So thank you everyone and Allie and her puppy. It takes a lot of work to put these on, so thank you. As you know, the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center is a nonprofit organization and is a staple in our community and bringing public art to everyone around us. So thank you and for supporting all those efforts. And tonight, this installation is supported and sponsored by Jay Pelt. So thank you, Jay, for supporting. So now I'd like to introduce our guest artist of this installation, Nancy. Go.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out on this very hot evening. Here we are standing at the first home to be included in ArtPath event. I am so grateful to Katrina for all she does for these artists and for her encouragement of my work. Julia Sager and Michelle Carlson also deserve a shout out, as well as all the other staff at the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center and Barb who joined us tonight. The Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center does our community a great service by having this event each year. Let's give them all a hand. So, why include poetry in public art projects like ArtPath? Well, I have been making poetry since I learned how to write. At some point, I realized that the ways poetic language responds to the mysteries of life, to the depth of joy and sorrow we cause one another, to unexplainable cruelties, and the seemingly mundane events of everyday life, is not only a form of self-expression, it is also a way of listening. This poem is a way of listening to the connection between the survival of species inhabiting the world in different stages of endangerment and recovery. It emerged from conversations with my creative collaborator, Samantha Earle. One day we were talking about how she was inspired to start looking at what species had come off of the endangered species list during the pandemic. This process is known as listening. At the same time, I had been watching the news to see how newly elected President Biden would start the process of making good on some of his campaign promises, especially those related to the civil rights of disenfranchised people whose lives had been endangered even further during the previous 4 years. On January 21st, President Biden signed his first executive orders, and you see a list of some of those here in my poem. Read poem here. Notes on coming off the endangered species list, January 20, 2021. It is true, there is much to despair. Still, I remember a time when we would chant love at the drop of a donut, almost vaguely clear to hope for paths of equity. living things moved off the endangered species list this year. There, on the last line, a bird native to Michigan, warbling back from near extinction. And in the news, us too, delisting discrimination, defunding the border wall, reclaiming health care, reinstating marriage equity, rescuing dreamers from the brink, rolling immigration back to inclusion. Our hearts pulsing off the endangered species list. It seemed to me that some of the members of the human species were also shifting to the possibility of coming off of the endangered species list. You see also a line drawing of the Michigan or Kirkland warbler. That line drawing is made from my reinterpretation of a more complex rendering of the bird that Samantha had made earlier. I chose this species because the poem is in Michigan, and I want visitors to see that we can help our native natural species and each other from histories that threaten us with extinction. Our survival is intertwined, not just across species, but in very particular ways within the human species. The intertwining of the visual and the verbal and the environmental in public art spaces like this one is also a way to include poetry in those spaces, to make public space for the ways that poetic listening can expose the prejudices and practices that support histories of injustice and the possibility of doing so in ways that point to paths for change. Poetic listening doesn't only identify the need for change, it also helps us express the sources of that need. Our voices are restricted by the tropes through which we learn to listen. Lots of environmentalists have been realizing this and have changed how they talk about environmental degradation from a doom and gloom narrative to a story of what we can do to change what is only one possible future. Our social justice identifies the source of need for change and makes a call for that change. That's why I am so passionate about having poetry included in public art movements, especially here today. Poetry helps us listen in new ways. Before I go on for too much longer, I want to give you a chance to experience what I'm talking about. We have all experienced some part of our identity or life as endangered by the pandemic. But like the Michigan warbler, we have all learned something as well. Whether that something is about social inequities that cause some to be disproportionately affected, something about our own desire for a different kind of work life, something about a habit we want to change, or something about the joys of slowing down, or the importance of supporting the people in the communities we belong to. Our identities, desires, and values shift in times of trauma. Like the Kirkland, we warble back, but the environment has shifted. What has shifted for you in your environment? For me, shifting to teaching online was a seriously frightening prospect. I was sure I would fail, and 30 years of successfully keeping teaching at the heart of my work in higher education would crumble. But what I learned was that keeping the well-being of my students at the center of the process could happen in ways I had never imagined. I adapted the curriculum. I went even further out on the limb of trusting them to co-create a supportive environment, and even told them when I needed that support. I came off of the endangered species list as a teacher. What is something you feel or felt was endangered during the pandemic we are experiencing? What did you do to recover, or what might you do if you are still in a place of loss? Let's take some time together now to create a list of the things that have been endangered by the pandemic for the community members here tonight. After that, we'll create another list of things we have done or can do to get those things off of the list of endangered things in our lives. Grab a piece of chalk and list something of value that is or has been endangered for you by the pandemic. Remember too that there is power in even the everyday things or the things that might seem mundane at first glance. Let me know if you need any help getting your work on the sidewalk. And there's sidewalk chalk up here. So you just grab a piece and you just list, name something that you feel, that you value, that has been endangered by the pandemic. All right, is everybody done? Did anybody not get a chance who needs a piece of chalk here? All right, so I'm going to read these, and the next thing that you're going to do with your piece of chalk is list something underneath one of them that either you've done to help bring that thing off of the extinction list, or something that you think you could do to do that. Okay, so you might write on your own, you might write on somebody else's, like Celia. So I'll read, and that'll give you a minute to think about how you might help with one of these endangered things in our life. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to take a minute to read now for you some of the ideas that we shared about how we might keep these things on the endangered species list. I'm going to take a significant amount of the time I have left to do that. It's going to only be as long as it takes to read these. And then I have about 3 sentences I'm going to say at the end. So breathe a sigh of relief. You're not going to be here listening for another half hour. All right. North Dakota rides, and I know what this means, rode the kitchen, because Ned's been cooking a lot. So that's what that means. Time with my mom, and the idea was letters, calls, Zoom game night. My bad habits and ambition is the response. Accurate tellings of history. Heather Cox Richardson. Read some stuff. Career. Retire. Rethink. Family visits. Commit to reaching out. My health. Responses are hug loved ones and exercise. Relationship with family. Zoom with a little frowny face next to it. And flying now. Mental health, we have virtual therapy, making art, gratitude, and humor. Motivation. Meditation. Meditation. Thank you so much, Lori. Meditation. Connection. Have Zoom happy hours. And me for happy hours. And I think I got them all. Connections. Reach out to a friend. Physical closeness with family. Reading online with grandkids. Fantastic. Well done. I give you a round of applause. Thank you so much. I hope that you can see a little bit about how being inspired to do a little poetic listening that has both of these components that all social justice art has, identifying the source of the problem and then trying to make a response, take an act as a response. It is true, there is still much to despair. Still, not only memory is a reminder of the possibility of hope, poetry inspires this kind of community. Thinking about change is hard if we don't share our insights. What spaces do you make where this can happen? Thank you very much. Sydney.
I was wondering how you decided on the medium of writing your book. Is it more about verbally, or are you thinking about painting it anywhere? I'm just wondering about like the etching and the copy.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you, Sydney. So I, some years ago, boy, it's hard to remember how many, maybe 7. I was very frustrated with my obsession to get poetry in public art movement. And it just so happened that I was writing grants to have a sidewalk poetry event on campus at MSU, and then director of landscape, Deb, came to our first meeting, and I was talking about, because they used to, the only way you used to be able to do it was to have wet cement and make these big metal plates and stamp them in, and they're very expensive. She walked into the room with this thing with a big blanket over it, and at part of the meeting where we started talking about installation, she whipped out the blanket, and it had a miniature engraved Sparty head, like on the new end of the thing. And those are the people that did this. So she said, I think we should talk to them. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. So I've been working with them on a number of Lansing poetry, sidewalk poetry project at MSU, and one that's coming up in 2022. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and it lasts as long as the sidewalk does. So, but it's much more technical than I realized, because you can only go so far in before it cracks. There's all that. Thank you. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about how the pandemic has shaped your poetry practice, and also where we might see your poetry in public in the future that you can talk about?
Okay. Thanks, Katie. The pandemic, like a lot of people in the world, I hit a point during the pandemic where I was having very hard time. And some of the people here are people who helped me do that. I was depressed, I was very anxious, and the anxiety was really quite intense. I had never experienced it at that level before. It was physiological, like I couldn't breathe, that kind of thing was happening. And I started using the ways I apply social justice poetry to looking at my own anxiety and its sources and possible things that I could do to get some help. I mean, going to teaching online, I don't know how many of you had to do that, but I'm telling you what, it was bad. It was bad. And so I started, and some of you who know me probably see this, I started sort of focusing on the sources of the anxiety, on the sorrows in my life, and the ways that things in my life could help me respond to those emotions. So that's I guess the main thing that happened. As far as where you can see my work in the future, I have submitted to a few journals that I'm waiting to hear from, poetry journals, which I've never done because I always do public poetry, and I've started doing open mics, which I never used to do either. So those are places that you can see me Thursday nights at KT Sexton's open mic at Global Love, and at the other what's the name of the theater? Red Robin, and places like that. So I'll be doing more of that, and then there'll be more bigger surprises coming up later for public. The people who did this have just figured out how to do it on balls, which I've never been able to do. So there's a yes. Yes. Yep. Bob has a great idea. One of the other places that you can see my work soon is in the bathroom at Harry's, where Bob is making murals and putting some of our 3 people's poetry on the walls in the 5 people's poetry on the walls in the bathroom.
Men's and women's?
Men's and women's. Yep. Yep. Thank you for reminding me of that. Any other questions tonight? Well, I just want to thank you all so much for coming again and on this very, very hot evening. And I have cards with the poem on them if you didn't get one. And you can always contact me at nancydejoy@gmail.com. Just my name at gmail.com. All small letters. I think we should, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I thought you wanted to talk. All right. Well, thank you again so much. And let's give another big hand for the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, again. I wanted to remind you of a couple events coming up. We have next week a new installation coming online at the gallery. You can come and see us in person on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 11 to 3. On Thursday, the 9th, we're going to have an artist talk with the artist, AJ Pranzer. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So join us for that, and watch out for some fall activities coming up. So thanks again for enduring the heat and supporting us and coming out, and have a great end of the summer.